Okay, so our last video is going to be on panel data sets. As you already know, the panel data set consists of a cross-sectional data set and also a time series data set. So we're dealing in two types of data set all at once. The data set that we're going to use is the state traffic fatality data set, and it consists of a cross-section of 48 US states and a time series of data set from 1982 through 1988. And as you know, like all the data set that we use are basically from the author website. So when you go to the author website, there are two tabs here. Sometimes we use dataset from here, sometimes we use dataset from here. So our dataset that we are using is related to chapter 10, which is the fatality dataset. And in the fatality dataset, I always recommend that you read the data description before you start doing any estimation. The data description will tell you the abbreviations, the description of all the data that you're using. For example, here the author basically writes for us everything, like all the details that we need, and most importantly the series abbreviation and its description. So before you start doing anything, you need really to know what the description basically implies, because otherwise you will not be able to understand what are these names, because you actually need these exact abbreviations when you type it in your code. So like before doing any regression, before writing your code, I always recommend you to have this file open, like the Word document description of the data set open, because you will need it a lot. You need to go back here and come and read the variables that you are using. So the panel data set is different from the other data set that we've been using, because here I need to define my data set. I need to tell Stata that this is not just a cross-sectional data set, as most of the data set that we have used. I need to declare my data set. I need to tell Stata that this is the data set I'm using, has a cross-section and a time series in it. So how to declare a data set is by typing xt set. Usually X stands for, like in Stata, it stands for the cross section, T stands for the time series, so I'm saying it's an XT set. And the starting definition should be related to the cross section. So you check the data set, you know what the author called the cross section. Sometimes they call it countries, sometimes they call it states, sometimes they call it regions. It depends on different examples. In our example, the author used state for as a name for the cross section, because it's over 48 states. And for the time series, sometimes it's called time, sometimes it's called years, sometimes days, sometimes months, but in our data set it's in years. And you can always describe the dataset as we have done many times. So you can either describe the dataset all together, or you can define it or describe it in terms of each cross section. So xt describe, as we're gonna see, would give us a description of each cross section, and xt sum would give us a summary of each cross section, like the max, the min, the mean, the standard deviation of each cross section. So it's up to you which one you would like to do. Okay, I prefer to do the 4, which is basically description of the whole thing and description per state, summary of the whole thing and summary per state. Once we come here, it's very important to remember that we're not going to do the regular regression. Whenever we do the panel regressions, we need all the time to have the xi 2 dots before the regress command. Okay, so every time you do it in a panel, you need to have the xi command in your line, and if you want to add the time effects, then it's going to be like I dot year. The I dot year is going to create a dummy variable for each year. Okay, and if we run this up to here, you can always highlight and run. So if you run it up to here, as you can see, we have different dummies for different periods, right, or different years. It's very, very important, and this is called the time effects. Just notice that we haven't yet added any state fixed effects. It's very, very important that you want to check whether this I dot here dummies are statistically significant or not. They are actually needed, they are actually important or not. So in order to do that, you basically do an F test, and the F test for a specific variable, and this is going to be like the I years. And in order to get all the I years, I'm sorry about that. So in order to get all the I years, it's basically you put like an underscore and then capital I year and star. This would let Stata understand that you want it for all the dummies. And you just run this command, would give you the F statistic. And the F statistic is basically telling us that, you know, there is, you can always compare this one, you know, with the degrees of freedom, 6 degrees of freedom, because we have 6 restrictions, we have 6 years to be tested, so you can always check it with the 6 degrees of freedom, whatever, 5%, 10%, 1%, whatever you like. Or you can always just use the p-value, and the p-value here is telling us there is a 54, or I should say approximately 55% probability that the null is correct, or in other words, there is a 55% probability that the dummies are equal to 0. Or in other words, I probably don't need the time effects in my regression. This is actually what the F test is saying. There is a high probability that these are not needed. You can also do the I.state, and again, remember, you can always change this name based on whatever name you have here. So if I have this one as country, then I need to have here I.country. If I have it as region, then I have I.region, and so on. You can always do the I.state, and the I.state, you're adding here cross-section fixed effects. And the cross-section fixed effects is going to create a cross-sectional dummy for each cross-section that you have. And again, based on the result of the F statistic, it's basically saying that there is a 0 probability that this null is correct. Okay, so there is a very, very small probability that the null holds true. You can also get the same result using the critical value from the F table. In other words, we need the cross-sectional fixed effects, right? Because if there is a small probability that these are equal to 0, in other words, I need to have state fixed effects in my regression. The other thing that you can do is you can also combine the state fixed effects and the time effects in one regression, and this is and this is also done by using what we call a Chow test, and Chow test is basically an F test on both, right? So so we have here, you can also, you can also add the two together. So I can also have it as, like, based on here, I need to have both, right? So the first regression was not incomplete. It was basically telling us there is still omitted variable bias because I have not added the state fixed effects. Once we have included the state fixed effects, then based on the results of the F statistic, I need to have state fixed effects and also time effects into my regression. Again, I have not explained the model because I assume that you have read already the description, the dataset description. It's about state, and it's about a year, and it's about 48 states in the US over the period from 1982 to 1988, and it's basically trying to explain what are the factors affecting the number of traffic fatality. And one of the important things is about unemployment rate, is about the taxes on beers, plus other factors. So to get a complete understanding of the abbreviations that we have here, like what is MRALL, beer tax, employment of the population, MLDA, and so on, you can read it here. So so let's say the MLDA, which is one of the factors affecting the fatality rate, is the minimum legal drinking age. Okay, and this is our dependent variable. The dependent variable is the vehicle fatality rate. Okay, and we are basically trying to explore how the beer tax plus other factors, let's say the minimum legal age of drinking, how the this is another factor here that we have in our regression, the employment population ratio, how this would affect our dependent variable, which is the fatality rate. So yeah, so we can always add many other factors in your model. Like our model is kind of simple, as you can see it here, but it's very, very important to understand that whenever we're talking about panel data sets, I need to change the or I need to declare the data set to state. So I need to have xt set. The first word is going to be related to the cross section, the second one related to the time, and whenever we're doing regressions now, we need to have it as x dot xi dot two dots, and then I need to have I dot here based on the question. So I can have a question asking you, please add the time effect or add the cross-sectional effects. I can ask you to test, you know, the F statistic, that whether we need the time effect or not, the F statistic whether we need the cross-sectional effect or not. I can ask you to do them, you know, whether we need it or not. And we can also have it, let's say, you know, you can have the two together in one test. I'm sorry about that. So you can have it, you know, right? And this one is basically doing an F test on all together, right? So all of them all together. So it's just one F test instead of doing twice. I'm saying the same thing, that we need the two time effect and the cross-sectional effect in our regression, right? So you can do it either this way or you can combine the two, right? But the most important thing is that remember that you already have an F statistic in your regression. The results of your regression already have an F statistic, which is this one. But do not get confused between this F statistic and the one I'm asking you, because this F statistic is related to everything in the model, starting from beer tax all the way down. But if I'm adding state fixed effect and time effect, I need to have a specific F statistic about these dummies, about these cross-sectional dummies or these time series dummies, or combined, you know, in order to get like one F statistic for all of them at once. Okay, so this is about the panel dataset. It's very, very important to declare it and to have the commands for the year fixed effect, time series fixed effects in each regression. Again, based on the question, you might have a question asking you only about the time effects, another question about the cross-section fixed effects, or a question that is combining the two. Of course, before doing anything, read the data description, the Word document description that you have on the author website. Make sure that you cover the slides, read the slides, understand the main econometric methodology behind it before you start working on it here instead. All right.